What's going on, everybody? My name is Ben, and welcome back to Ben Builds with Joe. This is episode number 2 for the Mitsubishi A6M3 and I'm hoping that we're going to be able to get quite a lot of stuff done today with my first major hurdle, and that's going to be the raised panel lines. Now, I wanted to go ahead and do something I haven't really done a lot of, and that is rescribe. I wanted to try to rescribe most of this aircraft. So let's go ahead and pull out the pieces. I'll show what I'm talking about. Now, last episode I covered this briefly, but let me say again, most of the panel lines here on the kit are recessed. Everything going from wingtip to wingtip, those are recessed. Everything from leading edge to trailing edge of wing, those are raised. Unusual, I know, but that's the way it's done. On the fuselage, everything from nose to tail, it's all raised. So that's going to be probably the biggest challenge. But again, everything is nice, neat, clean. It's all 90-degree angles. There's no weird complex curves. It should be pretty straightforward. So that's my plan for today. I want to talk a little bit about how I personally rescribe, talk about the tools you need, go on a little bit about how I do that, and then we're going to get into just a little bit of preliminary work before next episode where we'll actually start rescribing. So in order to rescribe, we're going to need some tools. First of all, we're going to need some jeweler files. I always use these. They're great. Next, we're going to need something very important, that is Dymo tape. Now, Dymo tape comes in a couple different sizes and multiple colors. This is the thin blue, and I have the thicker black one here. So I actually got this off of Amazon. We should be able to cut these in half to extend the life of the tape itself. Not a problem. Definitely need some of that. We're also going to need a set of tweezers. That's going to be very helpful to have for pulling off the tape off the Dymo itself. And then we're going to need a hobby knife. We've got a brand new blade chucked into the end of that. Always a good thing to have handy. We're also going to need some either pencils, or in my case, I'm going to use a Sharpie. And I'll show you how I use that. Some sandpaper to go ahead and clean up some of the areas. And a couple other parts and pieces here, like a ruler. This is actually shortest ruler I actually have, but it is what it is. And we're going to need a pin vise. Now, this is probably the most important piece of the equipment aside from the Dymo tape, because this is where we're going to actually throw our pin in there, and that's going to cut in the panel lines. We also have a tiny template here in case I need that. And we have our needles here that I'm going to be using for the actual rescribe. I'm probably going to go with this last needle right here. I think that's going to be sharp enough, not too thick, not too thin. That should work well. Now, you can actually go out and buy all these really fancy scribing tools, and really, I don't know, I haven't really tried many of the scribing tools themselves, but I've heard you get a little bit better grip maybe on it, but honestly, they do about the same thing. So I'm just going to stick with the tried and true pin in the end of a pin vise and just try it out. Honestly, I don't really have a comparison. This is what I'm used to doing, so we're just going to go with that. Again, this is a bit of a longer pin. It's a little more flexible. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I find that I don't press as hard because it's flexing, so I think that takes a little bit of the pressure away from actually overscribing. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how we're going to approach this. Now, like I said before, most of the aircraft's panel lines from wingtip to wingtip are all recessed. That's great. We don't have to fool with that. But everything else, the raised stuff, we're going to have to go ahead and take care of. Now, we're going to start on the back ailerons first. And I actually want to do something right before we start here. I want to mark the part number here on this actual aileron, because this kit ailerons are marked differently. So we're going to go ahead and mark this with a 1 and a 6. Part number A16. In fact, we'll throw a little A on the front here, even though I don't think I'll be able to read it. Good enough. At least we know this is part A16, and we know it's going to be the left side of the rear tail. So let's put that aside. Hopefully this should go well. So we're going to start out first off by taking our Sharpie, and I'm going to go ahead and trace all the panel lines. We're just going to do the aileron here because it's simple, it's easy, and it's already out. So we're going to just trace the actual raised panel line, making sure to get plenty of marks on the top and the bottom, as well as the panel line itself. I don't think you can really go wrong here. So lots of ink. Really make sure that we have the area around the panel line colored and also the panel line itself. Now we'll put that marker aside. Make sure that is dry. It's pretty decent. So now we have a black mark around all of the panel lines here that need to be rescribed. So now we're going to take our jeweler file. This is just a flat, regular old jeweler file, nothing fancy. And we're just going to lightly go over the top of all of those raised panel lines. That's going to take them down and eliminate them entirely. Now, when we start noticing that we're taking away that Sharpie on the top and the bottom of where the panel line was, we know we've gotten the panel line, we're good to go. Honestly, a few swipes, they're not very hard to get rid of. Very, very smooth. So that's what we're going for. A couple places here and there might need a little extra, but again, we know we've actually reached the plastic when we start taking off that extra Sharpie. That's a good indication for me not to go any further because I don't want to damage the plastic. Here we'll have a little bit of a close-up for you. Again, we're going to take our Sharpie and we're just going to start here, let's see, right about here, and we're just going to make sure to trace a lot of black around those panel lines, and this one here, and then finally this one right there. There we go. That's actually not bad. Now, make sure we have a nice coverage. That looks pretty decent. So now we take our jeweler file, and again, we're just going to start right up here and slowly work our magic. And you can already start seeing that the plastic starts showing through where we're taking down that panel line. So we're just going to go all the way down here. Oh, it looks like we were good on that part right there, and we're good up here as well. So you can see once you start taking away that extra Sharpie, you know you've reached the bottom of the plastic, you're good to go, and move on to the next area. Now we'll get this end right here, and I think, okay, we're good there. We need to go around and get a little bit on that top section right there, but honestly, it's really, really simple to take these things off, guys. Not hard at all. I mean, at least they're finely raised panel lines, so that's not too bad. Now that we have all this off, we're ready to move on to the next step. Now we're going to grab the Dymo tape, and this is really awesome tape. It's like a must-have for any rescribing. We're going to use my hobby knife. We're going to pull up that little sticky part there on the back, and with my tweezers, we're just going to pull off that back protection. Pull that off, throw that away, we don't need it. Now we're going to go ahead and stick this tape down where we want to go ahead and rescribe. So I'm going to do this long line first here. So I'm going to use that light colored line that we created when we sanded down the panel line. I'm going to use that as a guide. I'm just going to stick this down and follow that line right to the edge. There we go. Give it a little bit of pressure there, and I think we're ready to go ahead and attempt to scribe. Now we grab our pin vise here with the pin chucked right in there, and just draw it along. Nothing fancy. I'm not using too much pressure here because I don't want to cut too deeply. I want it to be subtle. I don't want it to go crazy or damage the plastic. Couple of swipes and you can already start seeing you have yourself a panel line. So not too bad. We can do that on every single line just by pulling up that tape, moving it to the next line, sticking it back down, and tracing it with the pin vise. Not really that difficult, but it is time consuming. Now I'm going to take some sandpaper, and this sandpaper has seen better days, but we're just going to start going over that. We're going to work our way through different grits of sandpaper, get a little bit more aggressive with this one here. Remember, when you scribe a panel line, you're actually digging into the plastic, and some of the plastic comes up and out on either side of where that panel line was. With some sandpaper, we can just remove those raised parts, no problem. Now we're going to have to go ahead and clean out those panel lines again, but that's okay because we've already scribed them. It's just a matter of cleaning them out. A little bit of fine sandpaper there just to polish it out. And I think we're pretty much ready to move on. So again, like I mentioned, we can go ahead and clean out these panel lines just by taking our pin vise with no pressure whatsoever or very little pressure and just drawing it through that line. Popped out some of the excess plastic. You'll notice that it's not that hard. It is time consuming, but it's not hard. Just going to have patience with this one, guys. Now, our last step is just to basically take a little bit of Tamiya extra thin, and I'm just going to trace over those newly cut panel lines with some of this extra thin cement. The reason I do this is simply because, well, extra thin cement works really well at tapering down any sort of the bulges that happen when you go ahead and scribe plastic. We can go ahead and move on from there. So let's get that time lapse in, and we're going to go ahead and mark up all of those raised panel lines. Let's go. So we have all the panel lines marked for the fuselage and for the wings, also for the ailerons. We are ready to go. Next episode, guys, we're going to come on back and we're going to start cutting into this plastic. We're going to start actually doing the scribing. But until next time, guys, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you get an idea about how we scribe aircraft, at least how I do it. And until next time, go ahead, get yourself some bench time, build something cool, enjoy yourselves, and we'll see you back here on the next episode of Ben Builds with Joe. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you soon.